can't remember if it was Nick Kent or Grail Marcus or maybe even Ian MacDonald who said when referencing the Velvet Underground's seminal debut album that it was the most influential record ever made, and that although nobody ever bought it, everybody who heard it subsequently went out and started a band. So on that basis, I want to read you a passage from the most influential book in history, or certainly in Arenda's history. When Karen Sullivan read this, she immediately started a publishing house called Arenda. This is the first book signed by Arenda, so tonight, ladies and gentlemen, I'd quite like to read you a wee passage about storytelling from the very first Arenda cult classic book that was signed, Last Days of Disco by David F. Ross, me. The piece I wanted to read to you is about 4 soldiers, and Gary, one of the main characters, who has signed up to join the army in 1982, just before the Falkland War broke, basically to try and impress his dad and create a better relationship for his dad. And they are based in Wales, getting ready to be sent to the Falklands, and Gary and 3 colleagues are sitting around a campfire at night telling stories. This is Gary's story. So we went to Glazenock, my primary 7 class, about 60 wains, the yuns that parents could afford it, ken. Glazenock House was a scary old mansion in the woods near Cumnock, like one of the Hammer horror films, you know. For the next 20 minutes, Gary created the setting, described the principal characters, and set up the premise for what the boys believed would be a hilarious reveal. He told how Glazenock House was absolutely bang in the middle of nowhere, hence its resemblance to where they were currently billeted. Rumour had it that the house was haunted, but kids' stories being what they were, there didn't appear to be any real foundation for such hearsay. The 3 classes in Gary's year were accompanied by 4 teachers, 3 women of varying age and attractiveness and 1 man. The females were Miss Hardy, a well-liked and at the time heavily pregnant primary 6 teacher in her early 20s. Miss Peters, a middle-aged deputy head, prone to prolonged bouts of screeching at the boys, stoically using only their surnames. The third was a quiet woman of indeterminate age. Accepting that for a primary school child, anyone over the age of 30 was ancient, Mrs. Wallace was definitely a fossil, but from which prehistoric era was uncertain. The male teacher was a bastard. Gary was clear about that, and a Yorkshire one to boot, stressed Gary, much to Benny Lewis's annoyance. He was a throwback to the days when physical punishment was practically encouraged. He thought nothing of reducing a child to tears in class by a hard slap to the head with the back of his hand. Not surprisingly, he was universally hated, even by those who didn't have to sit all day in his primary 7 class, awaiting the latest outburst of unpredictable violence. He had a brutal post-war short back and sides, topped off with what looked like 3 shredded wheat sitting in a row from fringe to crown. The 3 privates rocked with mirth as Gary described the old teacher, concluding that he wore a constant look of nervous anticipation that the state would eventually catch up with him. A Peely-Wally demeanour that suggested he lived in a subterranean cave when not occupied by the business of torturing 11 and 12-year-olds. Gary got up to illustrate old Mr. Copthorne's very pronounced limp, and confirmed that any attempts by pupils to inquire about its provenance were likely to be met with a projectile blackboard duster aimed at the inquisitor's head. Gary's classmates were all certain that he had a wooden leg. An awkward gait sustained the suspicion. His baggy tweed trousers, held up by antiquated comedy braces, concealed any indications of the point where wood met flesh, but common consent among Gary's classmates had it just below the knee. "Can I just check, boy," said Kevin, "what's all this got to do with your father?" Gary put his forefinger to his mouth. Glazenock was fucking magic. It was exciting. Most of the Waynes had never been away from home before, but the instructors were a great laugh, ken. Gary continued for another 5 minutes, describing a context that his 3 colleagues all knew well. He told of those who worked there being used to groups of boisterous, unruly and occasionally homesick kids, and demonstrating a great deal of patience with them. The 5 days there were filled with outdoor activities that at first resembled what Gary imagined national service to have been like for Harry, his dad. He'd once heard Harry telling Hetty that he'd served in the catering division and having spilled some suet pudding onto a higher ranking officer's shoe, was told by that officer to run 2 miles, ladle still in hand, back to base. Once there, he was to say to a sergeant, "Permission to speak, sir," and upon the granting of said permission, "I've come from the camp to inform you that I am indeed an idiot, sir." Then Harry was to salute, about turn, and march quickly out of the office, before running the 2 miles back to the kitchen. After Glaznock, the young Gary figured he might have some similar stories with which to connect with his dad. Gary then told the story of Sean Tobin. He'd come to Gary's primary school a year earlier in what seemed a bizarre free transfer from the Catholic school directly across the road. There were constant battles between the small soldiers from each school. To exacerbate the issues, the Catholic kids had to come to Gary's school at dinner time because their building didn't have a kitchen. Every day they were marched single file across the road and past the Proddy school's ground floor classrooms. 45 minutes later they were all marched back again before the next session began, monitored closely by at least 5 teachers. Gary explained that Sean was known as Toblerone, after those jaggy bars of Swiss chocolate that were virtually impossible to eat without breaking a tooth or bruising a gum. Despite having one of them, Sean adapted quickly and was quite a likeable kid, but one for whom trouble and chaos were magnets. Mr. Cobthorne, the one-legged Yorkshireman, was his nemesis. Gary had witnessed the man routinely abuse the boy, physically and verbally, particularly after finding out through an essay Sean had written at the start of the year entitled "How My Family Spent the Summer Holidays" that Sean's father had left his mum for another woman. Sean Tobin appeared to take Cobthorne's grief in his stride, but in the run-up to the Glaznock trip, the veracity of the attacks seemed to intensify. Gary recalled being astonished that Sean was allowed to go at all, as barely a day went by without some new outrage that had the playground gossips reeling. But he couldn't recall Sean ever being threatened with the no Glaznock sanction. So on the last night before we left, Gary said, the teachers lit us of a party. His 3 friends sensed the long digression he set up was finally coming to a point, although Benny was clearly still unsure of its relevance. All the supervisors had gone home, but the curfew was extended to 10 o'clock. There was loads of jelly and ice cream and ginger. Gary sensed clarity was needed on this final point. Lemonade, cream soda, dandelion and burdock again. For the Curry's factory up the road, the 3 squaddies understood. Everybody was having a good time, even that old prick Copthorne was laughing and joking. But then he starts fucking sloshing about. It's obvious he's either pissed or he's taking something. He falls over and knocks the wee record player down. Thank fuck for that, because Bohemian Rhapsody was the only record they had with him. Gary stopped and winked at Kevin, letting him know he was joking about that last line. So the 3 other teachers have to lift him and help him out. Every cunt was pissing himself laughing at this. Wee Toblerone rushes over to the door for them all and opens it. And when he went out, he keeks back in and gives us all the thumbs up. Gary took a drink from his water bottle. I fucking Kent Sean had done something to him at that point. Put something in the old bastard's drink, most likely. Sean was in a dorm room with me and 4 others. We'd all been sent back to the rooms by Miss Peters. She kent something wasn't right. She was angry, but she didn't ken who with. We sat in our room, wondering what the fuck was going on. Sean had been away for almost half an hour. Then there was a loud knock on the door and a gruff voice saying, "Right, lights out, you little fuckers." Toblerone came in and my heart almost missed a fucking beat. He had a wooden leg in his hand. Gary was good at telling stories. He wasn't bad at lying either. He appreciated that sometimes they went hand in hand. The key to telling good stories is the pacing, the building of tension in order to accentuate the dramatic arc. He looked at the expectant faces of his audience and he knew he still had it, the look of, well, what the fuck happened next? Gary smiled and then continued. Toblerone got a chair, lifted it onto one of the beds and stuck a leg up through a suspended ceiling tile. I was excited and shiting it all at the same time. We all were. Nobody could sleep, but we all agreed nobody was shopping either. So next morning, everybody's done for breakfast and the cops are there. Old Copthorne's sitting in a chair with his left trouser leg flapping away wildly in the breeze. The police are telling everybody that nobody's leaving and that there'll be no breakfast until the leg's back. Nobody spoke a fucking word. Eventually we all went home. A week later there's a letter sent out to all the Waynes for the school. It told all the parents about what went on, and as a result of the leg business, that was the end of the trips. Gary stood up again and breathed in deeply as if the story was finished. The other three looked bemused. Before Benny could lodge a protest, my dad got the letter and immediately said he kent it was me. No interested in listening, no opportunity to tell him what actually happened. He just said, "You're a bloody waster and you'll never be anything different." Never spoke a word to me after that for about 6 months. I was 12 or 13. It was an unusual story, Kevin eventually conceded. Benny really wasn't sure what to make of it. Henry couldn't see how it fitted in with stories explaining how your family reacted when you said you were joining the army. "That's the reason why I'm here now," said Gary, sensing the need to elaborate on the moral of the story. "When I was down in London, I realised my dad would be thinking he's just run away. He'll end up nicking stuff and doing drugs and all that shite. So one day I thought, fuck it, do something that'll make the old bastard eat his words. If we end up going to the Falklands, he'll have no fucking choice." Private Gary Cassidy of the 2nd Battalion Scots Guards stood up tall, saluted his comrades, and then turned and walked away to look for more firewood. Thank you very much. The one and only cult classic, The Last Days of Disco. Thank you.